Heyo, Omni Dogs and Omni Kittens. It's Omni Dog from Omni Dog's Vault here with another Crime Corner interview with my co-host Taylor Brown. Taylor, how's it going?
I'm doing great, and I'm really excited to be here with our most recent interview, Frank Barbiere. Is that the right way to say it?
Nailed it.
All right, good.
Frank is the writer of Violent Love from Image, books 1 and 2. And he's also, I got to know him through Third Eye Comics in Annapolis, Maryland, because he was there to promote Five Ghosts, although I think it was just in floppy form back when you were, when you came to a signing.
Was Chris with me when you came? Because I think we did two. One was like a Halloween one, and one was another.
I think it was the other one because I was on my way to the beach, so it feels like it was in the summer.
I don't think that was Halloween.
No, I feel like it was summer. But yeah, Five Ghosts is how I got to know you, and now you're telling me this is a collector's item, which makes it even more precious to me. So why don't we get started with just finding out how you became a writer in comic books, and did you always want to be a writer for comics or just a writer in general?
It was interesting because I always did like writing, but comics never really occurred to me. I grew up reading comics. Luckily, I was born like right in the sweet spot of like being young enough to remember like the boom of the 90s and be a comics fan in the 90s. So I feel like there were comic shops everywhere when I was like around like, I feel like 8 through like 13. And also like the X-Men show was really popular, like the animated show, the Batman animated show as well. And that was really like my exposure as a kid. And I would actually go to there was a comic book store in our local mall. So I would like, whenever my family went to the mall, I would go to the comic book store, and I was like introduced quickly to the idea that they were periodicals. They came out every week, every month. And I just read them pretty much my whole life, but I feel like I got really serious into them when I was in high school, which was around like 98 to 2002. And that's when things kind of collapsed a bit. I remember it was really hard to find a comic book store for a while, but kids I met in high school knew where there was a good one, a shop called New World Manga. I'm from New Jersey originally, and Livingston, New Jersey, which is still there, still a great shop. And I just started going like every week. I started reading Wizard and really like kind of opened up to like independent stuff. Well, stuff I'll call mainstream independent, like things like right when I was really getting into comics, as I want to say more seriously, like when I was a kid, I would just read what was whatever available, whatever in front of me. But it was right when Bendis really kind of broke out. And I remember Ultimate Spider-Man like 1 and 2 had just released, and I really liked those. But through that, I discovered Powers, and through that discovered Image. And that just really took me down a rabbit hole of like finding a lot of writers who I think were a little more outside just the mainstream, like superhero writers, that showed me like, oh, comics is a lot more like flexible. You can do a lot of different genres. Like ultimately I discovered Ed Brubaker, who really instilled my love of crime, as I always liked like crime movies like softly, but I never would have probably identified as like a crime enthusiast. But it was really like Brubaker's work on Criminal that got me into the genre as well. So I definitely owe a lot to him through that. But long story short, when I finally went to college, I actually went to school to be an English teacher, but I minored in creative writing and took a screenwriting class where I first started learning like story structure, and quickly learned like, oh, like it's very, very difficult to actually sell a screenplay. But I think I read an article in Wizard around that year, and I, for some reason, never really even realized that Image was all submissions driven. It wasn't like they had to hire you as a writer. It was just like I basically learned what a creator-owned comic was despite having read them for so long. Because I can't remember what was really popular at the time. But Powers, as I said, was my big Image book that I read a lot of. And long story short, I just started like taking out extra money from my college loans, which was a horrible decision, but used that to just find artists online and started hiring them and coming up with comics pitches. And getting rejected for a long, long time. And I became a public school teacher. I moved back to New Jersey, like the suburbs where I was from, which was actually only a block away from the Kubert School.
Oh, wow.
And I had been working with kind of just international artists I would find on DeviantArt, and I slowly pieced together like a graphic novel I released that was very bad, but taught me a lot about making comics, about how to actually do it. I actually letter most of my own stuff, especially my creator-owned stuff. So I learned how to do that. And I guess it was about like 3 or 4 years into it, like just like pitching and going to shows, when I met Chris Mooneyham, who ended up drawing Five Ghosts, and we worked together for about a year while I was still teaching, and we were trying to make this like sci-fi Western book that no one just ever really cared about. And I randomly had the idea for Five Ghosts, and I like pitched it to Chris, and he was like, "Oh, we should really finish the Western." But lo and behold, I managed to just kind of like bug him enough that he did the pitch pages for Five Ghosts. So the first 5 pages, I believe, and that was in like 2011, I want to say. And we did New York Comic Con the next year. Like I bought a table, like totally flooding it. I like bought a table in like the retailer section, like and not even the like comics retailer section. Like we were like next to people selling purses and things like that. And I had like no displays or anything. And I'm still not good at tabling, but long story short, like him and a bunch of artists I knew just came, and we were just hanging out, and he had the pages from Five Ghosts in his portfolio, and everyone who came by stopped and looked at those, and he had actually hand lettered those pages so people could read them. And everyone was asking us about that, and I had like self-published like copies of our Western, and just no one gave a damn about that. And I was like, we should probably do this book that everyone seems interested in. So I managed to convince him to I just left my teaching job at that point, so I was kind of like figuring out what to do with myself, and like moved to New York City, which was a huge transition for me, and great to like kind of be somewhere else, to be extremely poor, unfortunately. But that's fun. Why we actually did a Kickstarter for the first issue of Five Ghosts, as no one wanted to pick it up like from the 5 pages. So I was like, damn it, like I really like this book. We should just self-publish it. And at the time, I believe like Sam Humphries had just kind of broken with Our Love Is Real, which he self-published. So we were like looking at that model where he was selling directly to retailers. And I had done a whole bunch of research and like prepared us for this like very expensive, very stressful slog of like, okay, like we can probably self-publish this book. It'll take us like 2 years to do 5 issues of it, but we can make it work. And after New York Comic Con 2012, someone picked up a copy and brought it to Eric Stevenson, the publisher at Image, and he emailed me that November, I remember. He was like, hey, do you want to do this at Image? I was like, oh God, please. And from there, just kind of hit the ground running. But it was, well, and now, I mean, not to veer to away, but now I also work in video games. I actually work with Joe Madeira at his studio, Airship Syndicate in Austin, Texas. And Joe was one of my favorite artists growing up, which is crazy that I work with him now. And Battle Chasers was a book I really, really liked as well, that I never realized was a creator-owned book as well. And all of that and everything I've done since was all back to that moment when Eric emailed me in that November, like, hey, do you want to do this book here? And it was like, oh God, more than anything else. And it was a very, very lucky confluence of events, but I feel like managed to ride that out and build a career, thankfully, from there. But really, I feel like the most important thing for me was like learning structured writing in school. And in comics, I still do teach a lot. I teach college whenever I get a chance to I teach a lot of writing courses. And I feel like just like learning that structured writing is so important for comic books. And comic books, much like screenplays and like teleplays, are a very format driven thing. Like you have 20 pages typically for an issue. So you really need to know, like, have a good sense of pacing, have a good sense of structure to be successful. There's also, obviously, the art is a huge, huge component. You need to have an artist you have a good dynamic with. But I feel like it's just a really structured way of approaching storytelling, which I like a lot. And as I said, I feel like I'm just so thankful I actually studied a little more formal creative writing in school, and more so screenwriting than anything. It's one of my major like gripes with American education. I feel like they don't really teach you formal writing structural and general creative writing classes, but because screenwriting is so format and structurally driven, that's where they kind of lump everything in. So that's really been one of my passions as an educator, is to take a lot of the structural theory from screenwriting and show how it's universal. It's not just for that; it applies for things. But anyhow, that's a very long-winded answer of how I got to writing comics. But it was just a funny thing. I just always assumed you had to be hired by Marvel or DC, and it wasn't until I had read that article in Wizard about Image being submission-driven where I even thought to start making my own stuff. And yeah, it took a little bit from there, but as I said, I was extremely fortunate to break in relatively quickly and have Five Ghosts thankfully break in, I think, at a time when people were really hungry for creator-owned and things were doing really well, because it was March 2013 when that book came out. And as I said, we had been working on it as far back as 2011, though, so it really felt like a long, long slog. But yeah, that was that was a trip, and now here we are.
I had no idea that it started out as a Kickstarter.
Yes, you can still see the miserable Kickstarter. Like, it was before Kickstarter was really like as popular as it was. Like, I think we got like $1,100 or something like that from the Kickstarter. But at the time, we were just like so poor, like we needed that to finish the book. And it was at the time a godsend, though, because like, I mean, I won't get into the financial ruin of trying to make comics, but I really was in need of kind of a way to get things going. And it people initially asked us a lot about like, oh, like, was that a big promotion for you guys? But unfortunately it wasn't, because Kickstarter wasn't like the kind of behemoth it is now. Like, it wasn't a brand name that people actually went to. It was really just simply, I think I read an article about it in Wired. It was like, oh crap, we could like make money from this. Like, that's how we still ended up losing a bunch of money on self-publishing Five Ghosts. But truly, we just needed that last bit of money to get it done. But we're very thankful to the people who supported us. I do think in the first issue of Five Ghosts, it does have the Kickstarter backers on the back. As I said, it was a very small campaign, so they all fit on one little page. I think they're in the first trade too. I can't quite remember.
It's not in the paperback, is it?
I think it's in the first trade. I want to say, do you not see it?
It's in the back of the first issue, you said?
It's definitely in the back of the first issue, but like, is in the back of the trade?
I'll check.
I mean, I feel like an asshole if it's not. Sorry, everyone who backed us up.
I'm not seeing it, but maybe it's not. I'm just not seeing it. But at least you listed them in the at least you listed them in the first issue.
Yeah, it's in the first print issue. Well, note to self: when we republish, when we go to another printing on that trade, we'll do it.
Well, I remember this book being a really big deal whenever it came out. I remember being like sending a lot of. I think, like you said, it really came at a really popular time when Image is really going to the forefront of comics.
I remember it came out the same month as East of West, and I love John Hickman, and I was just like, for a minute, like when they were really pushing Five Ghosts, I was like, maybe we'll be on the cover of previews. That's like, oh no, John Hickman's book will be on the cover of previews. But no, it was really a great time. Like, Saga was really picking up at that time, and I feel like everyone was kind of like eyes on like what the books at Image were. And again, I'm still very proud of the book, and I think it's a great book, but I really do think it was that perfect like synergy of like a time frame when the book can do well, because it's just immediately like disheartening to know like just like sales on a lot of creator-owned books will just be lower now, because there's not that bubble of like excitement around them as much, that the market has already shifted. And I don't know, it's always a gamble, but we were just very fortunate to find an audience for the book and keep it going as long as we did. And it is something we do intend to come back to just every time we're about to like, I've kind of learned my lesson, because like I feel like in like 2016 and 2018, we like put out teasers like Five Ghosts is back this year. Then Chris got another job somewhere. I was like running around, so we kept delaying it. So I do constantly get people commenting on those on Facebook being like, where is this? And it's just like, yeah, we'll tell you when it's ready to come out. We will get back to it sooner than later, but we do love the book. We're thankful for anyone who's still interested in it. And we did end those issues on a cliffhanger, which was not great, but it is a story we do want to continue telling.
At least you have people who want you to continue.
I know that's the most flattering part, and why I just feel so bad. As I said, I learned my lesson about doing teasers before we have the issues done. But but know that it was always the plan to go back. Just life just keeps happening. So I believe Chris is working on the Scream book at Marvel right now. So that's currently his full-time gig.
Oh, okay. That's the Carnage.
Yeah. I think
Carnage
it's spun out of Absolute Carnage, but I know he's been working on that these days, and I do believe it's like an ongoing book as well.
And then that gave you, I mean, the success of Five Ghosts as gave you the impetus to be able to just put out Violent Love, which is what Crime Corner concentrates on, as crime books. And so although Taylor and I always say that just about every comic book seems to somehow be a crime book, a superhero anyway, but these really captured our attention, these two books, especially Taylor, who got me to read it. And was it easier for you to, once you had Five Ghosts under your belt, was it easier then for you to sell an idea like Violent Love?
It's tricky because like Image is always like kind of like buried under submissions, and at that point, and I feel like comics being such a small industry, it's like you're not competing with just people breaking in, you're competing with John Hickman, you're competing with Matt Fraction, you're competing with Brian Bendis. Like these are like, there's only limited shelf space, and I feel like it's getting even tighter now that publishers are not doing as many books. So through the success of Five Ghosts, I had managed to transition to full-time writing. Like I worked basically everywhere I could. I mean, I had to pay my rent, so I wrote as many books as I humanly could. And I was very thankful for everything that I got. I wanted to be a writer, and I'm extremely thankful I was able to do as many of my original ideas as I wanted to. That was always very important to me, as it was kind of creator-owned comics that made me want to be a comics writer. And
because you wrote Black Market at Boom, and you also have White Suits at Dark Horse, right?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of what else. Oh gosh, because everything just kind of hit at once. Like there was a lot of stuff that I was developing like slowly in the years I was breaking in, but Violent Love was a brand new idea. So I did Black Market with Victor, which Boom approached me pretty quickly after Five Ghosts started to gain some momentum, and they actually paired me up with Victor, which I'll always be thankful for, because we immediately hit it off. And I had read, I can't remember what Victor's stuff I had seen. I had seen some of his stuff on, he had done The Mice Templar with Mike Oming. And I think I had seen Polar online. I don't know if, I'm pretty sure Dark Horse hadn't collected Polar yet, but I was definitely a fan of his work. So when they were like throwing out some artist names for Black Market, I was like, oh my gosh, wow, I would love to work with him. And Black Market was a crime superhero book that I had actually like thought of the concept of many years before, and it was just one of those ideas sitting in the back of my head. So we did that book, and we were happy with it. And when we came off it, I approached Victor. I was like, "Hey, Victor, like Five Ghosts was winding down. I really want to do another book at Image, but it has to be the right thing, as they're very picky. And I know you've worked there before. Like, is there anything you want to do?" Because at this point, like I'd done a bunch of books. I felt very just like burned out on just trying to think of like high concept stuff. But I was like, is there like a genre that you're interested in? He's like, I would love to do like a romance comic. Like I'd just never done that before. And I think at the time I had I did a short run on Avengers World into John Hickman's run. And the first issue of my Avengers World story was actually a love story between Cannonball and Smasher. That really enjoyed it. Like it was like, I don't know, probably cornier than some people want it to be, but it was the first time I had really focused on romance in my work and done so in my own way. And I was like, you know what? Like, I think we can make this work if we do it in like a crime noir, which is Victor's kind of specialty, and I think his art really suits. So just from that, I started thinking like, okay, if we were going to write a crime romance story, what would it be? And I came up with a very loose pitch for Violent Love and told it to Victor, and he immediately did the illustration. That's the cover. This piece he did with like no logo, just the like body of it. And I was like, okay, that's perfect. Like, let's do this book. And really at the time I had been interested in doing a story that was a frame story. Like where it was someone kind of an unreliable narrator recounting a story. So I came in with like those pieces and was like, okay, like I know I want to do these things now. How do we actually just like hit the floor running with it? And I feel like I wrote the first issue like pretty quickly, and from there we just kind of worked through it. And working with Victor is fantastic. And why I like working in comics is like because you get to write and then someone draws what you write. So it is like a very like there's a lot of feedback. It's not just like writing prose and you sit back and be like, okay, people read that. And he definitely inspired me a lot as we were working, like seeing what he likes to draw, seeing what he really like kind of brings to the table artistically. And with Victor, I write very loose. Like I'll write a full script, but I'll be like, hey, like if you want to play with the layout on this page, if you want to experiment, go nuts. And one of the nice things about Image is like Image does not default like give you an editor. If you want to hire an editor, you can sort that out. But we had no editor on this book. It was really just me and him. So little things like I think it's issue 7 where like there's like the kind of in the issue flashback where we keep cutting to that segment of like Daisy falling down. And gradually we get there at the end. That was just an idea Victor had, like, as we were working on the issue. He's like, hey, like, I read the script. Would it be cool if I just kind of do it kind of out of order a little bit and, like, frame it all with this?
Let me highlight that.
Yeah, and stuff like that is just so fun to discover as you're working and, like, keep it organic. Yeah, so he really came up with just doing that the white panel sequence, like, throughout that issue. And as I said, it is very, very collaborative with him, and he is a great storyteller in his own right. And as someone who writes comics, it's like invaluable to have a partner like that and a collaborator like that, because they can just always make it better.
And he's the perfect blend of Bruce Timm and Darwin Cook.
Yeah, and those are obviously artists I also love. So like when I met Victor and knowing the stuff he loves and the kind of influences he has, it was just like the best of all worlds. And I feel like he's just like only gotten better too. Like his stuff he's done on like on Polar has been really, really kind of like envelope pushing, I think. And he just has such a great sense of storytelling. And anytime he does a page, like he'll be able to make it better than I ever thought in my head. Yeah, like see even that page with like Nails like punching stuff. Like I will like write that as just like a like 4 or 5 panel page, but then Victor will take it and break it into a layout that really channels the emotion and channels, I don't know, just a lot more of the storytelling. And with Violent Love, like he colored the whole book as well, so he really did a ton of work on it. Again, he's a fantastic co-creator, and Victor is also more than capable of writing his own books. So anytime I can convince him to work on a book with me, it is extremely flattering that he'd trust me enough to dedicate his art and storytelling to my script when I know he's very capable of doing his own.
Because he did all of the pencils, all the inks, and the colors, right? He did everything.
Yep, it was just me and him. So he did all the art. And then our designer, Dylan Todd, did the kind of logo design and all the trade design and stuff too. Yeah. I was really happy with like, because Victor came up with the general idea of doing the covers as like those solid blocks of color. But Dylan came up with that great logo, and I was really proud of how those covers all came together. But one thing that people will probably notice is like, and I feel like I've really leaned more into this, like with a lot of my books. Flag Ghost, I think, was pretty similar. But when you're working with such like talented like storytellers and like action settings, like I don't like bogging things down with like captions or like just kind of like inner monologue. Like I like cinematic comics where you can just see the action. And one downside is people are like, oh, there's like no words here. It's real fast. It's like, well, take a minute and look at like the 1,000 little panels he's drawing, because it is very cinematic. It is very like well paced if you actually give it a second. But I just, especially lettering my own stuff, like with this in Five Ghosts, there are some sequences where I would have lettering and I would just take it out. So I'm like, you can see what's happening. Having someone yell in a gunfight isn't going to really add anything. And I feel like Victor is just so good at sequences like that, and it feels very, very cinematic.
I heard Brubaker say once, the mark of a good comic is that you could just take out all the dialogue and it'd still be an effective story.
Yeah, and I cannot agree with that more strongly. Also, like that no dialogue balloon should really have more than 15 words in it. Like, obviously, sometimes you have to break that, but like that equity is like so important to me as well. Like, I think that, especially when you're doing kind of action books, like you see all you need. And again, I was really happy with this book. Like, we played with a lot of, if you don't mind me holding up a page, like just like a lot of like the typesetting and transitions. Like, we had a lot of fun just being like, oh, how do we just kind of experiment a little bit? And again, pages even like when we introduced Daisy, like Victor came up with that great idea of like, oh, we'll do just like a sepia shot of her. And I don't know, it's just one of those things that when you're like in it and working on it, you're just kind of churning through, because we did put the book out monthly, which is always a stressful endeavor where you're just like rushing to get ahead of deadlines. You're rushing to keep momentum. And I think I actually messed up the schedule for a minute because I was late with one script, but Victor is one of the rare artists who is just like, he can get the work done very fast, which was great for us to just kind of put the book out. I guess it was probably like, because we did a break for the trade, but it was probably about a little over like a year to get the whole story told. But when you're kind of in it, it's just very breakneck and you're moving along. But I'm super happy with how the book came out. So I'm very flattered that people are still discovering it, as it is something that I think, I don't know, a story that I think is pretty timeless in terms of it being a kind of noir 70s 80s story instead of something that feels so current and then immediately you move past. And I think that's really what drew us to that era as well, like minus the great like fact of like, oh, if we're going to do a story about bank robbers, it becomes infinitely harder to do that in the modern era where there's like cameras everywhere, everyone has a phone. Like, I love the ideas of just like having early 70s where someone could walk into a bank with a shotgun, steal stuff, and get the hell out of there. And it's not like, okay, immediately they'd scan for your DNA, like have all your photos and just find you. I think that, not that the book is total fantasy or hyper realistic, but I feel like we were skewing more towards realism with this one. And I think little things like that could have just like really been, we don't want our readers asking those questions like, how could they have gotten away with that, et cetera, et cetera. And
Right.
And we really like the kind of like manufactured nostalgia of that period. One thing I was a tremendous fan of is the obviously the film Fargo, but the Fargo television show as well. I think Noah Hawley, who was the showrunner and primary writer on that, is just an absolute genius. And I feel like I had seen Fargo season maybe 1 and 2 when I was approaching Violet Love, and like, in the like barest sense, I was like, oh, I want to do that, but I want to do that in a comic. And that's really where I love the idea, because I heard him talk about it, and it was something the Coens had said about Fargo said before every episode and before the film, like, based on a true story, when it's not. And Violent Love is not based on a true story, but we wrote that in that same way because of just that manufactured nostalgia, right. That manufactured idea of like, oh, well, if you kind of hold yourself to this, it becomes, it creates this false credibility in the reader where you then are playing the game of like, oh, is this something real? Is this something made up? And a lot of people assumed Bonnie and Clyde, and like, Bonnie and Clyde was obviously an influence on us, but it wasn't something that we were hoping to like base it off of or be an homage to. And also like Natural Born Killers kept coming up like when we were soliciting issue 1, and like, I like Natural Born Killers, but it's a very mean, like, specific thing that we were not going for. And I feel like very quickly it became clear we were not trying to do that.
Well, the biggest thing that hit me with this book when I read it last month is that it started out, I'm like, oh, I know where this is going. And then as I kept going, I'm like, oh, I didn't expect that at all. Then again, I didn't expect that at all. Because I've read so many crime books.
That's a reassuring thing to hear, so I'm glad for that.
That's why I enjoyed it so much. I've read so many crime comics, so many crime books, seen so many crime movies. I want to be surprised. I want to see fresh and original. How were you able to find a fresh and original spin on the revenge story? It's been done so many times. Because at the essence, this is a revenge story, but it plays out very differently than most.
I just really like honed in early, quickly that like, and I'm going to get very like nerdy artsy, so forgive me, but like I I knew we wanted to tell a love story, right? And we show you on the first page that the characters are going to die. Obviously, the twist being that Daisy doesn't die, which I think we landed pretty well. I think Victor, I love how he just like doesn't show her in that intro. Like, of course, a few people were like, "Oh, I bet that's the girl," but largely, I think he nailed that. And the big thing for me is like thematically really thinking about like love is not about destruction, it's about creation. So I wanted to do this story, especially a story about a mother, which I feel like we just always see male driven fiction. We see dad stories a lot, like and revenge stories that are just like about the catharsis of getting revenge. But with Violent Love, I was like, okay, well, I know that the couple is not going to end up together. There's going to be the tragedy of one of them dying. But I thought it was super compelling to have a story about a lead who, when they have revenge in their hands, realizes like, oh, like I've consumed my life with this revenge when I have a daughter who is alive and who I should take care of. And that's what the love really should be about, not throwing my life away to kill someone, which is like fleeting and meaningless. And I feel like that was like really my driver of like, okay, like I want a story where we really do want to see Daisy get revenge, but hopefully at the end with her daughter, like you realize like, oh, you know what? Like this is really the important part. And then really like have the twist with Lou. Spoilers if you haven't read the book, but that a character who seems close actually has done something horrible. And for me, that was really important to get in there because I wanted to sell that unreliable narration. Like, I love the idea that like you're getting the story from Lou and you just assume that he is a good person, but he also made a mistake. And obviously Daisy forgives him, and then we see him and Dakota like kind of go and extract revenge for her. But that was the stuff that really interested me, and to kind of build it as like a little engine that felt like it was going one way, but then give it that twist. I recently heard like a writer speaking about this, and there's a little bit of danger in that because like if people just want to see a straightforward revenge story that can maybe catch them by surprise, like it's basically if like you tell your kid, I'm going to get you a car for Christmas. They ask you for a car for Christmas. You tell them you're going to get a car, you're going to get a car. And then they open the Christmas present and it's a plane. You want to make sure like a few months before Christmas, you're like, you know what? Planes are pretty cool too. And with Violent Love, I hope we kind of skirted that. I think from about the like middle of the story when you realize like, oh, there is like the modern timeline as well. I hope that's where things kind of shift a little bit. Like, oh, this isn't as clean. But it's definitely something I just like push for as a storyteller. Like it's hard when you work in genre, and I love working in genre. I'm a huge fan of crime stories. I'm a huge fan of just both genres that I work in, and always trying to think a little bit of like, oh, what's like a rewarding twist that works thematically that doesn't just feel like you're pivoting to just create something unexpected. But I'm glad it worked for you. As I said, it's definitely a book that became very hard to pitch like high concept wise, because it really is just like, no, it's a crime romance. Like that's what we did. And it didn't really have like a high concept of like, oh, but one of them's a zombie or something like that. And I feel like the market is very, very high concept driven. And for a long time, people told me like, this book won't work. Like no one will care because it doesn't have like a supernatural element to it. And like, on one hand, I feel like it didn't like explode on the shelves because of that. But I do think and this is more credit to Victor, is like a really well executed, like good crime story of the genre. I won't say generic because I'm not using that as a pejorative, but I think that if you like crime stories, hopefully you really will enjoy Violent Love and it will surprise you. But as I said, a UFO isn't going to land at issue 7 or something like that.
I think you were able to honor noir tropes, but subvert them at the same time. So I think you
Thank you so much. Well, and Victor is such like so much more well versed than I am. Like he's a huge like classic crime cinemaphile, and I feel like he was able to infuse so much of that into the artwork and like really take the story and put it in a specific time and place. Because when writing, you say like, hey, this takes place in the 70s, and like, okay, like you can obviously use visual reference, but I think like his style just works so well for that, and he was able to like really bring a lot of like character to just the artwork that made that a good fit for him.
I really
But,
liked a lot. What surprised me was the twist with Lou. That is what really surprised me, and I also liked how it was told, flashbacks and flash forwards, but it never got confusing. It all flowed organically, um, because a lot of times you can get those flash forwards and you're like, wait a sec, how do we get here? We were just there. But not in this book. It made complete sense to me.
I'm glad for that too, because that is something we experimented with in Black Market, and quite honestly, I think the timeline in that book got a little messed up and really kind of was off-putting to some readers. And it sucks for me because one of the things I think is so great about comics is the fact that you don't have to tell a completely linear story. But I feel like just as I've grown as a writer, I realize like kind of what the like ideal experiences with that. And with this, I really want to make sure that like, hey, like there's a reason we're jumping around like this. It's pretty self-contained by chapter for the most part. Like most issue has like we tried not to like go to like 3 different eras in an issue. Like we'll move around, but like make sure we're showing you just stuff we need to know. But I'm glad that worked because as I said, it's something that I think comics is really well suited to versus something like TV or film where for budgetary constrictions and just like I guess some people do it well, but I do think there is just something very cool about comic storytelling where you can like literally do a panel that is in a different era completely, and like our brains can process that well because you're taking it all in as a whole piece. But I'm trying to think of it. I just really also wanted to do a frame story where again it is someone else telling the story, but not really address them, like not have narration from Lou, like just kind of use that as almost like a weird device of why we're seeing the story, that he is ostensibly telling it to Penny. It's not like he's telling her every gruesome detail. It just kind of fades us in to establish that era. But it was very, very important to me to do a frame story with like a frame story payoff where we get to that era in the future where there's meaning there. That's why it wasn't just like, and then Daisy killed Johnny Nails in 1975 and we're done. I really want to build something that took us back into that era and revealed something new in the modern era, which is the 80s in this book, instead of just keeping it all in the past. And it's why like I feel like this book, like I'm so thankful to do it as a comic because I feel like it works really well in that 10 issue run. I mean, we probably could have even gotten more out of it if we wanted to like decompress even more, but I feel like trying to cram this into a few issues or just like 2 hours of a movie or something like that just would not be as satisfying, because it was really important for us to spend the time like with these characters and get the moments we needed to see down and make them feel believable. Because if anything, I would have loved to do a middle arc that focused more on Daisy and Rock like on the run, like becoming bank robbers. But I'm happy with what we have here. But if we were to have made it longer, that would have been the part to kind of show them kind of doing even more together rather than just quickly getting to where we end up. And it would have been like the final volume would have been more to the future. But alas, I'm happy with what we did with the 10 issues. But you're always kind of thinking like, oh, like how much space do we have? How much can we really run with?
Well, you want people to want more, not to wish there was less. So that's a good problem to have. I think it was the perfect length. So
Awesome. Like I said, I'm glad to hear that because we never really compromised, but it was one of those things where like I feel like part of the hook of the book is like, oh, you will see this couple come together and rob banks, and I feel like that was one of the most interesting choices after again Victor had kind of done the illustration of them together, and we had to make a choice of like, oh, where are we going to start with this? Like, are we going to show them as a couple? And I'm like, oh, there's no joy in that. Like, you don't want to just see like a love story is about two people falling in love and ideally with some kind of friction, not just being like, hey, I love you and oh, I love you too. And that's why it was important to me to make it like a growing process and have Daisy like even be with someone else and like even start out with these characters who aren't necessarily like outwardly attracted to each other, and from there like I really kind of got a little analytic about like love stories and how they work, and I think this genre like is well suited to that, and it's not. I don't know. I don't think it's probably been done quite a lot, but I hadn't really seen a lot of comics doing it, and I thought that was fairly novel. And as I said, like just as a writer, like I like to work on stuff that challenges me and it has me thinking outside the box a little bit. So this was definitely a very different project for me, and it was really fun to do it. And as I said, that's why I'm so thankful that people are finding the book and liking it still, as it was something that I think was very outside our areas of comfort at the time, and kind of definitely, I think, outside the genres that are super popular. But I'm still very happy with it. So
yeah, so if you're a fan of Darwin Cook's Parker or Ed Brubaker's books, please buy both of these trades. They're both very fairly priced. Get them on Amazon, get them in stock trade, your local comic book store. This has me and Jess's full recommendation. So please support Frank and read a great story.
Thank you so much.
Do you have any other future comics that you could talk about, or any projects you're working on with maybe Victor or someone else?
So I do have a number of comics that unfortunately I can't announce, but I've been a little quiet for a while, but I am working on something with Victor that we are making great progress on, and we'll be announcing soon. I know he has a bunch of new stuff that's going to come out in the interim. So if you like Victor's art, I highly recommend to you, one, go read Polar. It's a great book he did by himself. That's just extremely him going as far as he wants into his own like kind of creative visual tendencies and experimenting with form. He has a new book coming out on Dark Horse. That was another like web comic he's collected. I cannot for the life of me remember. It's called something Mercy, like No Mercy, or like God, Amateur Hour. But look up Victor online. You'll see a lot of his work. I cannot recommend it enough. He's fantastic. And then, so I have, I think by next fall, I'll have 3 things announced. So please just keep an eye on kind of my Twitter is the best place. And I would be also remiss to mention, so I am working in video games these days. I wrote a game called Darksiders Genesis, which came out on PC back in December, but actually comes out on consoles this weekend. So if you're into video games, Darksiders Genesis is out. And I'm also working on a League of Legends RPG that we announced back in December. I can't really say anything else about it, but it's a game I'm writing, and I think if you like any of my comics work, you'll really like these games too. If you don't like video games, I don't think they're going to change that opinion for you, but they are video games. But it's just been exciting for me to kind of move around into different mediums. But I'm very excited about my new comics projects. I'm so sorry I can't talk more about them.
Now, they're coming.
Yeah, I will be very loud about them when I'm ready to announce. Probably, I'll be real, probably in the summer, like probably around San Diego Comic-Con is when I'll start announcing stuff.
And do you work closely with Joe Mad on these?
I talk to him every day. Yeah, we're a very small studio. We're only about like 45 people, so it is very funny to just be pals with Joe now. And then I'll see him draw and be like, "Oh wait, that's right, you can draw like that."
What do you enjoy more, video games or comics in terms of writing, or are they just different?
It's very different. Like I love comics because I have complete control, but I'm also super collaborative. So I like games because it is, again, there's a whole bunch of different artists all working together. And as a writer, like I'm very fortunate that you get to make a lot of stuff up and then a bunch of other people execute on it and make it look amazing. But working with voice actors has been phenomenal because the games I work on are fully voiced. I feel like, quite honestly, as a writer, it's really helped me like with dialogue to know like, oh, like, if you write shitty dialogue, someone's going to read it and it's going to sound really bad when they act. And that's been tremendous. We've been very lucky to work with a lot of like fantastic voice talent as well. So I'm really looking forward to that showing up in my new comics as well. Like, I feel like it's been a great period of creative growth for me. So I'm the kind of writer like who I always want my new book to be better than my last one. So, and again, we will return to Five Ghosts soon. Hopefully we'll have something to announce with that soon. It's a book we absolutely love, and I apologize for my tone even getting complaining about it. It's just, trust me, I'm just as frustrated as a lot of the fans, as every time I think we're about to do it, something comes up. But I have written multiple new issues of Five Ghosts that once we kind of get the stars to align, we will get rolling on. So I look forward to hopefully soon. I will not say when, but soon, quote unquote. But
we'll all be here to buy it whenever it does come out.
Yeah, we won't.
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to mention the Joe Mad connection because I have another show that I co-host called Omni Bros Live, and Gabe, one of my co-hosts, is probably the biggest Joe Mad fan out there.
Oh no, wait, he probably likes Darksiders then. So.
Oh, I guarantee it, and I'm sure that I'm going to make sure he watches this video so he can find out more about the game. I know that he's just a huge Joe Mad fan, so now he's going to.
That's funny.
Frank Barbiere fan.
Gabe works at Torpedo Comics in Las Vegas, so maybe you and Joe Mad can go out there for a signing.
Oh, man.
Time.
Well,
I'm sure Gabe would love that.
I'm always down, so I'm always down. And I can at least complain to Joe to try to go, but I can't speak for him.
Well, we have some wrap-up questions that we ask our guests.
Oh, please, yeah. I hope I feel like I talked at you guys too much.
No.
Oh, no.
Easy. It's better than having to pry the answers out of you.
Yeah.
Very easy for us.
Great.
We have some questions we like to ask our guests who come on Crime Corner. So what are some of your favorite crime movies or crime television shows?
So I feel like it's predictable, and I can see the Breaking Bad poster behind you. Breaking Bad is unabashedly my favorite show of all time. Like, I think it is absolutely genius. And I suppose one thing I can say is if you find yourself not able to rewatch all of Breaking Bad, like Alan Sepinwall, who actually does reviews, I think for Rolling Stone, and actually a newspaper in New Jersey, has a phenomenal book called, what's it called? It's called... I think it's called Breaking Bad 101, and it's all his episode recaps put together. So it's a excellent, cool little book you can just reread and get the whole experience of almost rewatching Breaking Bad in 1/1000th of the time. But I love Fargo. I think the Fargo TV show is absolutely fantastic. I feel like I'm much more of like a modern crime fan like that. Like I love like The Departed. I like obviously all of Scorsese's movies as well. And it really like dawned on me. I love the Parker books that Darwin Cook had done. I've never actually read the originals. I mean, I know he very, very closely adapted the Don Westlake books, but it's been on my mind to go back and read a bunch of those. But time is not always out there. And I love Criminal. Criminal is a huge, huge influence. Though I did not find the time to watch the show Brubaker did with Nicholas Winding Refn.
Well, each episode is an hour and a half, so that's a lot of time to set aside.
I watched the pilot, and I'm like, this is cool. I'll find time, but I just cannot get in there. Yeah, but it's on my list of one day to do. But I think his films, like I really love Drive, and I was like lukewarm on Neon Demon, and what is the other one called? The
God Forgives.
Only God. I remember liking Only God Forgives. It's funny because I tend to like not love surrealism, so like I feel like he finds like a good balance of both. And
Drive is definitely the best Nicholas Winding Refn movie of all time. It's the most. It's him not letting himself off the leash too much. He can kind of let himself go too wild sometimes and get too strange. Like those episodes of Too Old to Die Young, I had to stop because it was like I was like I just can't watch. I can't watch the desert landscape for 10 minutes. I have a son to take care of and a wife to hang out with. I can't watch this person walk in the desert for 20 minutes. I definitely understand that.
Yeah. And I also obviously love Quentin Tarantino. Like I like all of his films. It's funny because like I don't know why, but like as much as I love like very talky like Quentin Tarantino stuff, I just very early on knew I wasn't a writer like that. Like I'm not going to try it. Even like Bendis. Like I love Bendis, and Bendis's crime stuff is phenomenal. I would highly recommend Powers if you've never read it, or just like Jinx,
Torso, yeah,
or Torso too. Yeah, all of his like those nice little crime books that he did are fantastic. But for some reason, I just decided early on, like I'm not going to try to be the very ping pongy like talky dialogue guy. I like action, I like character, but that's why again working with someone like Victor, who's really good at character acting and like emotion on the page, is such a godsend for me. I also love I love Brian Azzarello a lot. 100 Bullets was one of the books that kind of like made me want to write a comic book, and I feel like one of my first books, White Suits, I love how it came out art-wise, but I was just such a new writer when I wrote it, and I think it's fine, but like I wish I could. I hope one day to work with Toby again because he is such a phenomenal artist. I did such cool stuff on that book, and I wish I wrote it better. So,
well, Jess, I haven't read it, but Jess said he liked it.
Yeah, I have it on my iPad. I forgot to bring it down here, but yeah, I liked it.
Thank you so much. That was a book though that just like really like I had plotted like before I broke into comics as like this like long sweeping epic, and it was basically a like Suicide Squad with criminals in Russia. But when we finally got the okay to do it, we had 4 issues at Dark Horse that I really had to like pick and choose. Like, oh crap, like what are we actually going to show in this? And sometimes just the reality of having to compress things can make them better. But like there, I really wish we had had more space to like tell the bigger story we had there. But thank you for reading it. Maybe I'm too hard on myself. But
yeah, I enjoyed it. So but I understand what you're saying, I guess. Not being a writer, I'm a reader. So all I can tell you is I enjoyed the experience.
It sounds like you're your own harshest critic. So that tends to happen.
Having some distance is good. Like I said, there's stuff that you always wish you could fix, but I'll without over complimenting myself. I'm very happy with how Violent Love came out. It's a book that I certainly would hand to someone and be like, oh, this is like something I'm immensely proud of and is very current. Because even Five Ghosts I love, but that was our first book, and there's some stuff in there that I really wish I could now rewrite. But as I said, I don't know.
It's a time capsule of a certain time of your life.
Right, yeah, that's my own neuroticism speaking.
One thing I like about both Five Ghosts and Violent Love is the rereadability of it. I love that I can go back to Five Ghosts, in a year and still want to reread it. And I think Violent Love has that quality too, because I've gotten to the point in my collecting career. I'm older than a lot of my peers in this comic book community, and I'm culling my library down now to stuff that interests me and that I want to reread. If it's not a reread, then I'll read it and I'll be giving it away, but I won't be giving these away because I'm going to want to reread them again.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad for that. As I said, that's also one of the nice things about working with really great artists. They're always able to pack so much in there, and we try to take the time to make stuff that is very detail oriented that will reward rereading, especially things like Five Ghosts, which have like its own like kind of internal lore. Like I am so excited to get back into that because there are many things we already buried in those issues that have come out that we want to pay off further down the line. So we're excited on that.
So as you can see, Jess and I are collectors of a lot of different nerd things. Is there anything that you like to collect?
I am definitely way too into toys and statues. Like
you and Jess are best friends then.
Yeah, I feel like I had to stop with books. I love books, but we have so many between my girlfriend and I, and we've moved like 4 times over the last 6 years, and every time I have to get like 40 boxes to move all my books. Finally, like we're in Texas now, and I just like bought real ass bookshelves that are like furniture, and I'm like, okay, I have just enough space for the stuff we have, but I am super into just like action figures and statues, and that I'm trying to curb, but I don't know what it is. I'm a fan of sculpture, I guess, is the classy way to talk about that.
Yeah.
Do you have like a prized piece in your collection that if you had to sell everything, you would keep this one thing?
I have that crazy, I actually have not unpacked it. We moved like 8 months ago, but I have that crazy Mondo Iron Giant toy.
Oh, I know that toy.
Yeah, it's like a giant, like Iron Giant that they like actually like use like the blueprints from the show and stuff, or the show from the movie, like, and from the animators, and that is a prized possession.
Yeah, they did they've done a couple things from Batman the Animated Series too. like that.
I regret not grabbing like those like 6-inch figures they do for Batman the Animated Series. Like all of them are so good, and I wish I had bought the Phantasm Batman double pack when it was not super expensive. But one day I'll hunt it down.
Jess is currently trying to pull me down the dark hole that is statue and toy collection. I've had to swat his hand away and say no, I can't do it. It is so tempting though. These things are so gorgeous, and there's so many.
And they're only getting better at making them, which is crazy too. Yeah. I actually have God, I need to two things I really enjoy, but they're actually way back at my parents' house from when I moved down to New Jersey. I put a bunch of storage. I have I think it was, I don't know what anniversary of Star Wars it was, but it's a statue of the Ralph McQuarrie drawing of Luke and Vader fighting, where Luke has like the gas mask on.
Oh,
they made like, big like
the original concept art.
Yeah, it's plastic, but it's a statue of that, and it's like two big pieces, one with Luke and one with Vader. And I need to take that back one day and put it back out. And
oh man, sounds cool.
And I have one of the first like Heath Ledger like Hot Toys of when he was Joker. I remember it was when Hot Toys discovered they could do like the like technology where you can move the eyes in the statue, so it's very creepy looking. But I have not reclaimed that from my storage unit. Now you're reminding me. Now I'm like, God damn, I need to go back to.
Yeah, now you need to display
stuff. So if your girlfriend gets mad at you, just blame us. Say it was their fault. They brought it to my attention.
Okay. But no, guys, I appreciate it so much. Is there anything that you've been reading recently that I should check out? I feel like I have not been up on my.
Well, if you want to read a great crime book, my favorite crime book last year was American Carnage by Brian Edward Hill.
I had wanted to check that out because Vertigo did it, right? It
was one of the last Vertigo books.
Yeah. That is.
If you look at a good crime book, definitely check that out. Jeff, what do you have?
Let's see. I just finished that I can recommend. Cullen, it's not a crime book. Is that okay?
That's okay by me.
Cullen Bunn's Dark Ark.
How would I say? I know Cullen really well, but I have not read Dark Ark yet. Because who was it? Did Juan Doe do the art on that?
Yeah, he did. And it's so beautiful. It's beautiful art, and it's. I'm going to do a thing on Aftershock Comics this week, and the concept is that there's Noah's Ark, and then the sorcerer has made a deal with the dark forces to collect all the other things like manticore and vampires and werewolves on this other ark that Noah doesn't know about. And it's 3 volumes, and I think it's coming out in a big oversized hardcover. But I found it fascinating, all the creatures that were on the Dark Ark, and the deal that the sorcerer had to cut to keep his family safe. And
yeah, that's such a good concept. Cullen is a great writer. I'm a super nice guy too. I actually had co-written with him for a tiny bit. I co-wrote the Lobo book at DC together with him for a little bit, and he's just always been the kindest guy and so supportive.
Oh, good. That's good to hear.
I can't remember if because I did a book at Aftershock that is like almost a crime book a bit called The Revisionist. It didn't get collecting to trade, weirdly. There's a digital trade of it, but it was about a time traveling assassin, so to speak.
Oh, I love it already.
Yeah, if you're curious, look it up. I was really proud of it, and it's we did a digital collection of it because I think it was before they were really doing collections in print. But it's called The Revisionist, and I think if you like my crime stuff, it's very much in that genre with some sci-fi. So
that sounds great.
Not to immediately plug myself, but
no, that's fine.
We want you to.
And Jess and I also do another show on his channel about Batman. And my favorite book of last year was Batman Mythology by Peter Tomasi.
Oh, yeah.
It was my mission last year to keep promoting this.
So you're holding up Arkham Knight.
Oh, I have the wrong one. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the second volume of that series. It's called Detective Comics Mythology by Peter Tomasi. So that was my favorite book of last year. So there it is. Sorry about that.
And yeah, it's just like that's just like issues of his detective run.
That's the first hardcover of his run, and it's a totally self-contained story. And it was one of my favorite Batman stories of all time.
I had loved the stuff that he was doing with Patrick Gleason on Batman and Robin.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that stuff was fantastic. I'll have to check that out. I've been meaning to. It's funny because I guess it's like sort of crimey. I had never read the Batman No Man's Land stuff, and I bought like a few of those collections, and I'm excited to read that when I get some time. I'm not that busy. I have time to read it. Trust me.
So, are there any comics you can recommend to us that you've been reading lately or enjoying?
Oh gosh, I've been so off it. I love the X-Men reboot that Marvel's done. I love John Hickman. So I saw an advance of his new book, Decorum, coming out, which is fantastic as well with Mike Huddleston. What else have I been reading? I've been reading some stuff here and there. I love Jeff Lemire. I feel like Gideon Falls has been incredible, and Jeff just does so much work. My buddy Matt Rosenberg is doing a Hawkeye book right now, which has been fantastic. And my other friend Steve Orlando just finished his 12-issue series of Martian Manhunter, which was fantastic. It was the black label Martian Manhunter. So I guess I'm lying. I have been reading some comics, but no, I really loved the lead into the new X-Men, the Powers of X, House of X stuff Hickman had done. As I feel like Hickman's Fantastic Four is one of my favorite comics of all time as well. And
I agree with that.
It was great.
You know what? Like, two last things I will say that I enjoy. Like, I love Brian K. Vaughan, and I think Private Eye is a fantastic like sci-fi crime story. It was originally he did it on Panel Syndicate, but Image has a collection of it in the wide format. But that is a fantastic book that I feel like not enough people read. And then also my favorite comic of all time, just straight up, is his book Ex Machina, which I think they've recently. Yes, there you go. Please read that.
I can't reach Ex Machina. It's way up there, but I can reach this one.
That's going to be a movie with Oscar Isaac. They can't call it Ex Machina because he was in the Ex Machina movie.
I know.
I forget they're going to call it.
Are they going to call it The Great Machine?
Yeah, you're right. That's what they're going to call it because he was already in an Ex Machina movie.
What are the chances?
That'll be good. He's a great actor.
Yeah, I think that's a great casting, so I'm excited for that. And that book is just like the smartest, best book of all time.
That's my favorite Brian K. Vaughan book. For sure.
Good man.
Modern Saga and Paper Girls, which are also great. I think Ex Machina is my favorite.
Well, this has been great. We really appreciate the fact that you took the time to talk to us, and we genuinely appreciate all the insights that you had. Sharing with us from birth to existence of Five Ghosts and the genesis of violent love and everything. I think this was very, very interesting, and I can't thank you enough for being on the show.
No, thank you guys so much. Please, anytime. And I can't thank you guys enough for checking out the books. It means a lot. As I said, it's all stuff I'm proud of, and I'm just excited to now get back to it. So,
and where can viewers find you on social media?
So Twitter is the best place to find me. Annoyingly, it is not my name. It's the name of my very, very old self-publishing company, which was Atlas Incognita. And everyone messes it up, but just at ATLASINCOGNITA, Atlas Incognita. And that's kind of just my nexus for everything these days.
I'll make sure I put that in the description so people can get.
Thank you so much. Like I'm looking at Atlas Incognito. I'm like, so close, but
we'll put your Instagram handle there as well.
Oh yeah, excellent.
And make sure you again buy these two books because they are
great.
They have our full.
I can hold one up as well.
Okay, good. Hopefully, we can all convince you by holding it up at the same time.
Like subliminal flashing, but yes, thank you so much, guys.
Well, thank you again, Frank. It was great.
All right, and thank you to our viewers, and thank you to anybody watching this now. You can like, comment, and subscribe, and if you leave a comment, Taylor and I generally always respond to comments. We always appreciate them. So thank you for watching, and peace and love. Peace and love.